At exactly 2:45 a.m. on October 21, 2025, this Ukrainian Air Force pilot strapped himself into the cockpit of a MiG-29 fighter that had no business carrying the weapons it had bolted to its wings. Within minutes, this 40-year-old Soviet fighter would attempt something its designers never imagined, delivering French precision-guided bombs against Russia's most feared security agency, using American GPS satellites and Ukrainian software held together by zip ties and a prayer. As the pilot taxied toward the runway, he could feel the weight of history. No one had ever attacked an FSB facility in this war. The intelligence services were supposed to be untouchable, protected by layers of security and the implicit understanding that some targets were off limits. Until now. The mission profile was insane, even by Ukrainian standards. He would have to fly at treetop height to avoid radar, then suddenly climb to 5,000 meters for the weapons release, a maneuver that would light him up on every radar screen from here to Moscow. He'd have maybe 20 seconds to release the bombs and dive back to safety before Russian air defenses could respond. The pilot advanced the throttles. Two Klimov RD-33 turbofans roared to life, generating 18,000 pounds of thrust. The MiG-29 lurched forward, accelerating toward the runway with its impossible payload. In the growing dawn light, the Frankenstein fighter lifted off, carrying French engineering, American satellites, and Ukrainian determination toward a date with Putin's feared security service. The FSB would soon learn what 3 years of Ukrainian innovation could accomplish. The pilot's MiG-29 screamed across the Ukrainian countryside at just 50 meters altitude, so low that his jet wash was bending wheat fields and scattering birds in terrified clouds. The terrain following flight was exhausting. Constant stick and rudder inputs to avoid power lines, cell towers, and the occasional farmhouse. But it was the only way to stay invisible to the Russian radars that infested the border region. The S-400 systems protecting Belgorod could track and engage targets at 400 kilometers, if they could see them. But the Earth's curvature was his friend today. At 50 meters altitude, the radar horizon was only about 25 kilometers. As long as he stayed low, fast, and didn't make any mistakes, he would remain a ghost. In exactly 3 minutes, he would have to abandon that invisibility and climb right into their crosshairs with some less than ideal tech. The target coordinates glowed on his iPad. Yes, an actual iPad duct taped to his instrument panel, marking the target, the Federal Security Service headquarters in Glovo, Belgorod Oblast, just 5 miles from the Ukrainian border. This wasn't some random military depot or ammunition dump. This was Putin's old agency, the successor to the KGB, the organization that had orchestrated countless operations against Ukraine. The 2 AASM Hammer bombs hanging from his wings represented everything wrong and right about the mission. These French-made precision weapons were never designed to talk to Soviet avionics. The MiG-1980s-era computer systems couldn't even comprehend GPS, let alone process targeting data from satellites launched decades later. Ukrainian engineers solved this impossible problem with battlefield creativity. Custom pylons fabricated in Kiev workshops, GPS antennas jury-rigged to forward mounting points, and power cables snaked through access panels never meant to be opened, feeding French electronics with Soviet electricity. The AASM Hammer itself was a masterpiece of French engineering, a kit that transformed dumb bombs into precision munitions. Each unit, costing more than most people's homes, featured inertial navigation backed by GPS guidance that could put a 250-kilogram warhead through a specific window from 70 kilometers away. Its range extension kit contained a solid rocket motor that would activate after release, pushing the bomb to near supersonic speeds. But all that sophisticated technology meant nothing if the Soviet jet couldn't tell the French bomb where to go. That's where the iPad came in, running software that translated modern targeting data into something the bombs could understand. It was the digital equivalent of duct tape, and it was about to be tested against the most sensitive target Ukraine had ever struck. The pilot hit the initial point and yanked back on the stick. The MiG-29 responded instantly, its nose pitching up to 45 degrees as the G-forces crushed him into his seat. The altimeter spun wildly. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 meters. His radar warning receiver exploded into chaos, as every air defense system in Western Russia suddenly saw a fighter climbing into their engagement envelope. The cockpit filled with electronic screams as search radars locked on. The S-400 battery southeast of Belgorod painted him with its 92 N6 gravestone radar, measuring his speed, altitude, and heading. In seconds, the fire control system would have a solution, but the pilot had one advantage: surprise. The Russians had less than 45 seconds from detection to engagement, and their procedures were built around conventional attack profiles. They would never expect Ukraine to do something so crazy, which was exactly why it might work. At 5,000 meters, the pilot hit the release point. The iPad showed optimal launch parameters as his thumb found the weapon release. Two thuds shook the airframe as the AASM Hammers fell away. Immediately, he rolled inverted and pulled hard, executing a modified Immelmann turn. The MiG-29 curved through the sky, trading altitude for speed as the pilot dove back toward the safety of low altitude. Behind him, the two bombs were on their way to the target. Their rocket motors ignited with a flash, accelerating them along a ballistic arc toward Glovo. GPS receivers locked onto satellites, while inertial navigation systems measured every tiny deviation. The bombs were now flying themselves, making hundreds of microcorrections per second to ensure they hit their pre-programmed coordinates exactly. The toss bombing maneuver he had just performed was a relic from the Cold War, developed for nuclear-armed fighter bombers to deliver gravity bombs without flying directly over targets. Simple in theory, insane in practice against modern air defenses. The Russian response was swift but futile. Two 48N6 interceptor missiles roared off their launch rails, racing to intercept the MiG-29. But the MiG was already back at treetop height, jinking left and right as he raced home. The interceptors, designed to knock out high-flying bombers, couldn't track a target hugging the Earth. They sailed harmlessly overhead. In less than 2 minutes, the bombs would impact. The FSB officers in Glovo had no idea that justice was flying toward them, guided by satellites they couldn't see and technology they couldn't stop. The two AASM Hammer bombs represented 3 decades of precision weapon evolution compressed into 250 kilograms. As they reached the apex of their trajectory at 8,000 meters, their onboard computers performed calculations that would have required a room full of mathematicians 50 years ago. Each bomb was essentially 3 weapons in one. The nose section contained the guidance package, military-grade GPS and ring laser gyroscopes that could navigate even if every satellite disappeared. The inertial navigation system could fly the bomb within 10 meters of its target using only motion memory. The middle section made the AASM truly terrifying, a solid rocket motor that turned the bomb into a hybrid missile, extending range to 70 kilometers and giving it energy to penetrate hardened targets. The rocket motor burned for just 15 seconds but pushed the bomb to Mach 0.8. The tail section's control surfaces adjusted 50 times per second, allowing complex flight paths, even circling back to hit from unexpected angles. Today, they would drive the bombs almost straight down through the FSB building's roof. As the first bomb's radar proximity fuse detected the roof rushing up, it performed one final calculation to determine the exact moment to detonate, accounting for velocity, angle, and delay to ensure the warhead exploded at the optimal point inside the building. The second bomb followed 0.3 seconds later, striking 20 meters away for maximum structural damage. Two precision weapons guided by satellites 20,000 kilometers above were about to deliver a personal message to Putin's old stomping grounds. Senior Lieutenant Smirnov, halfway through his morning tea, saw 2 fast-moving contacts appear on his radar, climbing rapidly from low altitude. The S-400 Triumph system he commanded was on paper the most sophisticated air defense in the world. Its radar could track 300 targets at over 600 kilometers, and its 48 N6 missiles could hit from ground level to 30,000 meters. But all that sophistication came with a critical weakness: time. The S-400 needed around 10 seconds from detection to engagement with low-altitude pop-up targets. Against a toss-bombing MiG-29, that was catastrophically slow. 2 48 N6 missiles roared off their launchers, racing toward the incoming bombs at Mach 6, but the geometry was wrong. The bombs were in a near-vertical dive, presenting minimal radar cross-section. The intercept probability dropped from 85% to 12%. The missiles passed within 200 meters, close enough to trigger proximity fuses under normal conditions, but the bomb's terminal velocity and steep dive angle put them outside range. The warheads detonated harmlessly as the French bombs continued their descent. The first AASM Hammer punched through the roof of the FSB headquarters in Glovo. The shaped charge detonated on impact, carving through steel beams and concrete like butter. The fuse, programmed for a fraction of a second delay, counted down with electronic precision as the warhead plunged deeper. The explosion converted 87 kilograms of high explosive into gas in microseconds. The blast wave expanded at 8,000 meters per second, creating overpressures of 200 psi, enough to annihilate anything inside. The interior walls offered no resistance. The explosion created reflected overpressure, blast waves bouncing off walls and floors, doubling and tripling destructive power. Windows didn't just shatter, they exploded outward, glass embedding into buildings 300 meters away. Office furniture became projectiles. Filing cabinets full of classified documents turned to metal confetti. The second bomb struck 20 meters from the first impact. The building's structure, already collapsing, gave way. The blast propagated through the weakened framework, triggering progressive collapse. Floor by floor, the FSB headquarters began to consume itself. The fourth floor pancaked onto the third, then the fifth followed. In less than 5 seconds, what had been a 5-story symbol of Russian state security became a smoking pile of rubble and secrets.